My name's Sam Hellman, I study psychology. I was pretty young when I was first experienced bullying, I think, at school. I came over from America when I was 8 years old after living there for 3 years. I remember coming back and being picked on for having an American accent, by all these young New Zealand kids. That triggered like a little bit of social anxiety in me, and that kind of hung around for most of high school, in all honesty. And it wasn't fun because I fought it. I was a real fighter. When it came to social anxiety, I would just try and push through, and I never sought help, I never talked about it. I just kind of was like, oh, get over it, and kind of just tried to push through.
I'm Nana, and I'm studying neuroscience, and I'm here in Australia doing an internship exchange program. When I was like 14, 15, I started to really struggle with anxiety, situations with other people, and even just as small as getting on the bus, I used to get so anxious. And I also dealt with like eating issues and not really dealing with that very well, and using food as almost a way to deal with anxiety.
My name's Christina, and I study a Bachelor of Sports Science and Nutrition Science. My journey with mental health definitely, I guess, took a turn when I did start going to uni, and the pressures and stress that comes with that, to show up and be okay, I guess, every day, instead of taking the time to give myself that grace and just slow things down and check in on myself during that season that I was going through.
So when I moved to Australia, it was like a second chance to kind of get over being the new kid. I remember there were instances where I would feel that social anxiety kind of, want to come up. You'd feel that kind of rise in your chest of like a little bit of anxiety. And I remember just being like, I'm not going to let this beat me. Like I've dealt with this, since I was a young kid.
Some of the warning signs for me was definitely when I started feeling very overwhelmed, and a lot of physical symptoms came with that. So feeling tired all the time, feeling worn out, and not being able to cope with just simple things that I used to be able to cope with.
So my whole life eventually became a massive focus on what I was eating. I started overeating, and obviously it led to things like binging and purging and stuff like that. When I wanted to recover and I wanted to not do this, and I wanted to have a healthy relationship with food, I was just what is causing me to depend on food in this way? So it took me some time to actually just pause and be like, okay, rather than just doing it like it's normal and going through life like everything's normal, actually thinking what's my thought process and what's actually happening in my mind to make me do this.
It's extremely important to keep on top of your mental health and to not let it, I guess, get away from you, and asking yourself how am I feeling today? Am I coping with these things in life? Because I think we can get so caught up in the busyness of life and forget to actually check in on ourselves, which is such an important thing to do.
It's not comfortable with the first few times when you're trying to love this thing that you've been fighting against for years. You've been hating it, you've been, I wish I didn't have this thing, why do I have it? All that kind of stuff. And you realize it's actually, in some ways, a gift, because you actually really are forced to kind of connect with the present moment. If you have had a little bit of anxiety in the past, you're forced to kind of push into the moment, push into the human experience of feeling fear. It's a normal part of the human experience. And we kind of live in this culture today where it's all about running away from, negative emotions like depression and anxiety and all these bad things, and running towards happiness. But actually, part of the beauty, I think, of being a human being is actually experiencing the full circle of the emotional kind of cycle that we have inside of us.
Every day I sort of had to remind myself to deal with things rather than turning to numbing or turning to food to numb. So there is Netflix, and there's alcohol, and there's everything sort of going on. You're always busy, so it's always I can't stop. So one thing I try to do, especially early in the morning, I stop and I have just a moment of just going through what I'm feeling and actually just being okay, how do I feel? How am I actually feeling? And because sometimes when you have a bad feeling, you don't actually know what that feeling is. You don't know how to describe it, you just feel negative. So sometimes I have to stop and be okay, what is this feeling? It's actually quite easy to find. I think it seems like it's such a difficult thing, but once you pinpoint what it is in your day, because the feeling comes back up and you do feel that pain, but it's almost a relief because you know what it is. And once you know what it is, you can address it.
Experiencing the full circle of emotion really gives you an appreciation for the highs in life, because you actually realize you can actually deal with the lows of life. You're going to start to get small victories. You're going to start to get higher and higher and higher. That more sense of, pride as you know that you're actually tackling life head on. You're not running away anymore. Anxiety gains power when you kind of run away from it. Or if you can get into that headspace of, I'm just going to take it one day at a time, victory after victory after victory.
That's something that I try to do quite a lot, is just make sure I'm addressing what the problem is and addressing what is actually causing this feeling, and then actually thinking it through and talking it through with someone, and just actually reassuring myself of what I know to be true, and then almost comparing it to that, comparing whatever is causing the problem to that. So if it's I'm anxious about something that's happening the next day, I have to hold on and be actually that's not now. And also I know that whatever happens, I'm going to come back home and I'm going to be okay. Not just being I'm just going to ignore it, or I'm just going to move on, and just forgetting that it matters, because it's not going to go away.
Train your brain when you're off the ball, playing the game off the ball kind of thing. When you're not actually experiencing anxiety in a moment, there are so many other things that you can do to make sure that you don't even get to that space. By eating well, getting around good people, exercising. I think running, because it's just so mental. It's just you and the pavement, and your knees and your legs all churning over, and nobody else is keeping you accountable. It's just you and yourself, basically. And those are the moments where I think you build that confidence in those moments to really, when you are in an anxious situation, you have all this kind of subconscious experience, knowing that you can get through, knowing you've been there before, knowing you've been to worse places, essentially.
So some of the things that I did to improve my mental health situation was definitely speaking out and seeking help. So for me, that was seeing different professionals at different times. And I do know at uni, they do supply that free counselling for students. So definitely speaking out, it took a lot of the pressure off the whole situation, because I was able to, bring someone else into the situation and get advice on how I can cope with it better.
It's okay to say no to the distraction, because from that you can actually process what's going on and process your emotions, because then you get to know yourself so much better, and you're not relying on anything else. You're not dependent on food, or you're not dependent on Netflix or anyone else. At that point, it liberates you in a way, because you always know that in any situation you will always have you, and you always have yourself to actually process things. You have time to just stop and think about what's going on, so that you have that skill built up for any time in life.